We were so close. We were right there. Montreal Canadiens come back from a 3-goal deficit in the third period. I thought the game was over. They tie it at 4, go through overtime, and lose in a shootout. By and large, a great hockey game. A point earned versus a point lost the other night against the Islanders. It's time to drop the puck on Montreal Hockey Talk. Hey, everybody. Kosta here with another edition of Montreal Hockey Talk for March 22nd, 2025. And before we get started, a big shout out to my friends over at the Deli Planet at Central Station. They're located just a few blocks away from the Bell Center. So if you're on the way to the game, it's the best place to stop and have a great meal for a great price. They've been open for 30 years. And the only reason somebody's open for 30 years is, one, their food is great and the service is exceptional. So go visit Nick and the gang over at Deli Planet. Make your reservation, 514-861-9999. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, they have comedy nights. And occasionally, you might even see Sugar Shammy show up and do an hour's worth of sketch comedy. So why not? deliplanet.ca. Now, getting to tonight's hockey game. I got to tell you, at 4-1, years ago, I would have turned the TV off and said, screw this. It's over. Deal done. Tonight, I had hope. And despite the fact that it was 4-1 in the third period, the Canadiens didn't disappoint. They came back all the way. It was crazy. You know, goals from Joshua Roy, Juraj Slafkovsky, and Christian Dvorak getting them to even with the Colorado Avalanche. In a hockey game, really, the Montreal Canadiens shouldn't have won. Right? Early off the cuff, right, like early on in the second period, I think it was on the power play goal, it was 3-0 for the Avalanche. First period, net domination by the Avalanche. They were the better hockey club. The Canadiens didn't have an answer. I think they only had, hang on as I look at the stats, they only had 6 shots in that first period, and a lot of them from the perimeter. Nothing dangerous on Mackenzie Blackwood. And lo and behold, 3-0. What was it? 5:24 gone in the second, and it didn't really look like the game was even worth watching at that point. Then you get a goal from Juraj Slafkovsky, his 15th of the season, to make it 3-1, and all of a sudden, there's a little bit of hope. And Brock Nelson scores. We'll talk about Brock a little bit later because he ends up factoring in the shootout too, to make it 4-1, and that's early in the third period, and everybody's like, oh, damn it, here we go, 4-1, dead and buried. Even I put something on Blue Sky saying ball game, and I thought it was over. But I kept watching because you never know with these Montreal Canadiens. And somebody mentioned they're like the 2015 Toronto Blue Jays. You know what? Tonight reminded me a hell of a whole lot of the 6-5 comeback win versus the New York Islanders years back. And, you know, it was just that kind of vibe. You got a goal from Joshua Roy, a little bit of excitement. Just 30 seconds later, Slafkovsky gets a second of the game to make it 4-3. And then, with 6:28 left, none other than Christian Dvorak, who's been a scoring machine of late, to tie it up at 4. They go through the last 6+ minutes of the third period. They get into overtime, and what happens? It boggles the mind why this happens at that point of the hockey game. But the referees, after Slafkovsky got tripped in behind the Colorado Avalanche net, the puck comes all the way back down the ice. Slafkovsky literally just barely touched Cale Makar, and he got called for holding. So the Colorado Avalanche got a huge power play in overtime. The Canadiens managed to kill it, had all kinds of momentum, and then Mike Matheson almost scored right at the tail end of overtime, but didn't quite do it. And then in the shootout, the only person scoring for Montreal was Patrick Laine. On the other side, I mean, the game winner, Brock Nelson, former Islander, always burying the Montreal Canadiens, just like Kyle Palmieri normally does, to make it a 5-4 win for the Avalanche, but the Canadiens earning a very valuable point in the standings. You know, there's a lot to be said about this hockey game, and I know a lot of people, including myself, are going to point fingers at Sam Montembeault, and for good reason. He wasn't very good tonight, and you know, whether you'll take a look at his shoddy rebound control or just the goals that he's been letting in of late, it's not that Montembeault hasn't been good since the Four Nations. He's been overplayed since the Four Nations. You've got a capable backup in Jakub Dobeš. And tonight, maybe might not have been the night to put Dobesh in, but last game against the Islanders may have been prime real estate. So instead of having Montembeault play 3 straight games, you could have given him a little bit of a buffer, a little bit of a break, and had him ready and rested for this game against the Avalanche. Instead, you had a tired Montembeault in goal, making mistakes in net, getting caught too deep, getting beat over the shoulder, stuff like that you see from a goaltender who's not completely focused. And the other thing you saw tonight, to the chagrin of J.D. LaGrange, was the rebound control. Absolutely putrid. And that led to a lot of second chance opportunities, especially in the first period. It could have been a hell of a lot worse. Montembeault made some big saves, but a lot of them had to do with bad rebounds and putting himself into a position to actually have to make a second save and a third on rebounds. And, even if you look at the shootout as an example, just that first goal, I forget who it was that scored it. Let me just take a quick look. It was Charlie Coyle that scored the first goal in the shootout, okay? He pulled the puck from his forehand. He's a right-handed shot, pulled it over to his backhand, and Montembeault didn't just do a single push. It was a double. And a double push means basically you plant your foot, you push a little bit, and then you push hard, right? That comes with fatigue because most goaltenders can go post to post without even batting an eye. Why he would have to push twice? It's a simple case of him being fatigued. That's the way I look at it as a former goaltender. You can't play a guy who's never played more than 40 games in the NHL, 50 plus, and expect him not to be fatigued. And that's where we stand right now with Monty. Chances are he's going to end up playing 60 this year, which, is no fault of his own. But if the Canadiens do end up making the playoffs, he's going to be burnt out because he's never gone this long in a season before. It's a lot to ask of a goaltender. So, give him a break. You've got a 4-game road trip coming up. And so now's the time to give him a little bit of a break and let Dobish take a couple of games down the stretch here. And I'll talk about those games a little bit later on. But, the one thing that I was really pissed off about tonight, especially late in the hockey game, in the third period to boot, was the officiating. There were times the Canadiens should have gotten a little bit more. And granted, the Canadiens got all kinds of power plays tonight. I think they had 6 total. Where are we here? No, 4 total. Excuse me. They were 0 for 4 on the power play. But, they did get the majority of them. The Avalanche got a couple of their own. They managed to score on one of them. But there were times on the ice that the Canadiens could have gotten a hell of a lot more. There was one point in the third where Arbor Jacki got absolutely mugged. Not only did he get hooked on one play, he got held on the same play after the guy lost a stick. I forget who the player was. I think it was Nikash. And nothing was called. Now, I understand a referee letting the first part go. It's the third period. It's a tight hockey game. I get it. But in the same sequence, to have the same player within seconds hook and then grab a guy and then not call a penalty, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that were saying that referees were trying to manage a hockey game. You're not managing a hockey game at that point. At that point, you're allowing players to get away with what they shouldn't get away with. If you're going to call stuff early in the game, and they did, you got to make sure you call it throughout. And granted, okay, tonight, the Avalanche were not as disciplined as the Canadiens, okay, taking more penalties, obviously. But in that sense, how many times have we seen the Canadiens be the team that wasn't disciplined and getting called for everything? And yet here we are with the Avalanche taking liberties against the Canadiens and not getting called. I don't call that game management. I'll call that game ignorance. And it's something that the director of officiating, Stephen Walcom, should look at. If you're going to take the time to sit down and make all these rules, then they should be enforced. Okay? I understand the whole point of situational awareness and knowing when to call a penalty and when not. We've seen it time and time again. But this isn't the playoffs. Okay? It is hugely important for the Canadiens to get points down the stretch here. But they're not necessarily playoff games. If you're going to call them like playoff games, then call everything in the first 2 periods and let the third period go completely. I think that's irresponsible. And I think the officials need to be better. But, we're not going to argue about the officiating. We got just shit all the way around. Doesn't matter which team you're looking at. Now, even if tonight was a positive because of the comeback, there's a lot of negative to talk about. Okay? And I hate going here. But these are all things that are going to hurt the Canadiens down the stretch here. Number one, I just mentioned it, is giving Sam Montembeault a little bit of a break here and there. You don't have to ride him all the time. He's been good. He hasn't been great, but he's been good. So, why not play your capable backup in Jakub Dobeš? I don't understand that. I understand that he's young. I understand that he's inexperienced. I understand you're in a playoff hunt. But at what point do you not want to burn out your goaltender? Even in years where the Canadiens were in the playoffs and Carey Price, they were right there, right at the bottom of the 2021, for example. Even Carey Price got a break down the stretch. He didn't play every game. He still got a break. Why can't you do that with a guy who's never played as many games? I would be remiss to understand that. Anyway, I'm going to get away from that subject. Now, more on the negative side, I'm going to talk about Mike Matheson, because again tonight, just like against the Islanders, huge brain farts. Now, either he's being overplayed or he's playing with an injury or something, because he's making mistakes that are uncharacteristic. And you can't afford to have one of your veteran defensemen, we've only got two, making those kinds of mistakes. I'm praying that Caden Gooley comes back sooner rather than later, because he needs help. And Gooley can take away some of those tough minutes that Matheson plays, because he's capable of doing that. And when he did get injured, he was the Canadiens' best defenseman at the time. So Matheson's got to play a stronger game. There were times in this hockey game where he needed to get the puck out of the zone, and he flubbed a little clearing attempt out that got intercepted in the high slot. Those are things that defensemen have to avoid. You can't afford to give away the puck in the high slot. I mean, that's hockey 101. If you're unsure, put it off the glass and out. It's okay to want to make plays. I get it. You want to be that flashy guy. I mean, you watch the Canadiens power play tonight. I mean, what did they do? They went east-west all night long and couldn't figure out anything. And we'll get to that in a second. But Mike Matheson needs to be smarter with the puck. If the Canadiens are going to have any type of success, especially getting the puck out of their own zone and transitioning into the offensive side of the game, it's key. The guys that can move the puck, like Hudson, like Matheson, like Struble of late, who's played fantastic hockey, they all move the puck up the ice with authority when they're playing well. Right now, Mike Matheson is struggling, and he needs to get his game in shape. Going to give him credit. In overtime, he was huge on the kill. Again, like I mentioned, he almost scored. But at the beginning of the hockey game, and in that third period, as the Canadiens were coming back, he made a couple of mistakes that could have cost his team dearly. Luckily, they covered his ass, especially Montembeault, but he's got to get away from those mistakes. They're going to cost him long-term if he continues to make them. Now, I mentioned the power play a second ago. One of the things that I noticed, right, is that this team keeps going east-west. I don't want them to go east-west. You got to go a little bit north-south. It's you're always looking for perfection on the power play, unfortunately, and that's going to be something I'm going to talk about in a sec. But there's got to be the power play's been good, but it can be great. The thing is, it's a little stagnant right now. You don't have as much movement. One of the things that you watch on the power play right now is Cole Caulfield. He's been struggling, not just on the power play, but at 5-on-5. He's playing too far on the wing. He's not taking the middle of the ice where he's the most effective and he can create more plays. He's not playing as much on the left side as he normally does. And now, instead, you see Slafkovsky more on the left, Caulfield on the right. And what happens is his shooting angle is different, and therefore changes the way he has to play the game. On the power play, it's the same thing. Cole Caulfield on the right-hand side is not as good as Cole Caulfield on the left. Now, Patrick Laine's taking up the left side, and Cole Caulfield is in no man's land, doesn't know what to do with himself. He gets into the bumper position, he never gets the puck. He gets to the wing, and what happens? He's got to feed it back either to Hudson or over to Suzuki, but it's never a play that's based on him anymore, and that's hurting him. He needs to get that confidence back, so you got to flip-flop and have Slafkovsky play the opposite side where he's got that same angle as Caulfield and make them shoot from there. And I think if you do that, things will be a little bit more positive as opposed to the results we're seeing right now. The other negative thing that I've seen of late is the Canadiens' lack of being able to start the game with a lead. This is the third straight game the Canadiens have given up the lead early, and they've had to come back. And that's going to be tiresome down the stretch. Granted, the character win and the character that they showed tonight There's nothing to besmirch there. You give him all the credit in the world for coming back all the way and tying this hockey game up when everybody thought it was over. Half the people in the Bell Center were about to leave. But the one thing that I want to see is the Canadiens come out on the right side of the ledger and not have to play from behind all the time. When they have the lead, they play a better brand of hockey. When they're playing from behind, they're playing with tighter sticks and they're unsure of themselves. And that's one place you don't want the Canadiens to be, especially when they're fighting for a playoff spot. Now, we saw the Canadiens get a 5-on-3 power play. And the Canadiens' 5-on-3 power play is as putrid as it comes. If we complained for decades that their 5-on-4 was bad, their 5-on-3 is absolutely useless. Tits on a nun, for lack of a better way of putting it. But now, here's the thing. When you look at the Habs 5-on-3, there's no movement. It's stagnant. For all intents and purposes, if you watch Patrick Laine on that power play, he's standing still with his legs stiff, which means he's not getting ready to move. He's standing in his office, much like Ovechkin does, but he's not moving around to try to make space for himself. Ovechkin's always on the move. He'll go around to the right, he'll skate around behind the net, and come back to his office and wait for a pass. If it doesn't come, he'll move to the point or move to the right. And he tries different things. Patrick Laine, no, stagnant. And so what happens when you're on a 5-on-3? That becomes a 4-on-3 because all they have to do is put a player right next to him. Nobody's going to pass him the puck. Takes that option right away. Right? And the whole premise behind a power play is to be able to create odd man situations in a small area, whether it's a 3-on-1, 3-on-2, whatever the case is. But that's not what the Canadiens are doing. Instead, they're trying to make seam passes and make the perfect play. You saw Slavkovsky try to go cross crease to Caulfield on the back door. The back door play, by the way, is a play that was made specifically to surprise a team, not on the regular. And the Canadiens have incorporated it into their power play as one of their regular strategies. It shouldn't be. I mean, you never saw Andrei Markov coming backdoor every single power play when he was with the Canadiens, and he was a master at it. But here you are watching Cole Caulfield trying to get set up on the back door because right now there's no other options for him. He's not going to go to where Laine is, and therein lies the problem. If Laine moves out of that spot and they force the other team to cover them, that spot that's vacated can be taken by Cole Caulfield. And your one-time threat is still there. It's not like you've lost it, but there's no thought there. Instead, you're stagnant. Instead, you've got Suzuki and Hudson switching places. You've got Slavkovsky down low, and then you've got Laine standing inside the faceoff dot doing nothing. And if you think you're going to score on 5-on-3 with a player that's not engaged in the play, you're not. Therein lies the issue, right? When they go 5-on-4, there's a little bit more engagement. Guys move a little bit more because they know they have a limited amount of space. But in a 5-on-3, you have all this space on the ice, so you think you can get away with it, but you can't, right? Because the strategy is keep a guy within stick length. If the pass comes across, he can poke it away. But Laine just stood there. Didn't move. Just stood there. And not that Patrick Laine's been playing bad hockey. He hasn't. He's been very good. You could see him coming back on the back check, engaging on both sides of the ice. His 200-foot game is getting better, as is his 5-on-5 game. And we expected that. He's not a stupid player. And given the backhand that he scored on in the shootout, we're not going to really besmirch him all that much. But you have to be smarter. You have to be better. And this comes down to the coaching staff saying, you know what? It's not something we practice every day. And it's not. A 5-on-3 situation, you don't really practice that at all. Why? Because it rarely happens. It's an enigma in the game of hockey, right? Where you have a 5-on-3 power play. But when you do get them, occasionally, and this is something I want to see, I'd like to see the coaching staff call a timeout and have at least a couple of set plays off the draw to be able to create that time and space that they need to be able to get a good quality scoring opportunity. We don't get that. And so, if you're not going to practice it and you're not going to have strategies for it, don't expect to score on it. Therein lies the biggest issue. Because if the Canadiens would have scored on that 5-on-3, 5-on-4, it would have put the Avalanche on their heels a little bit. And maybe, just maybe, as opposed to it being 4-4, it might have been 5-4 in regulation, the Canadiens getting 2 points. You don't know. And I'm stretching this out beyond anywhere it should go. But anything's possible when you have momentum. You saw it. The Canadiens got one goal from Joshua Ottawa, then one from Slavkovsky, and all of a sudden, the Avalanche couldn't play hockey anymore. Jared Bednar was losing his mind on the bench, ripping his players, and nothing. Anything they did didn't work, and the Canadiens managed to tie it up. That's what you want, and that's what a 5-on-3 power play does. It brings momentum to your side. So why ignore it? Get better at it. Maybe it's something that you work on in the offseason. Whatever the case is, just figure out a way to be able to engage your players a little bit more, because the pucks were going, they were moving all on the perimeter, and nothing was getting to the net. And that was the biggest problem on that 5-on-3. It's been the biggest problem on their 5-on-3 all year long. So, that being said, we'll move on to our last little bit here, and that is the 4-game road trip coming up, starting it with the St. Louis Blues. St. Louis tonight actually lost, and said that they're not going to be a good mood on Tuesday. And a lot of teams tonight, the Carolina Hurricanes, they were pissed. They didn't play very well, losing big time. The Philadelphia Flyers are fighting for their playoff lives. They didn't play very well today. And then they end that trip, if I look quickly, against the Florida Panthers, who the Canadiens have had some success with against this season, but still. The next 4 games is probably where the Canadiens are going to make or break this push for the playoffs, especially given that there's a back-to-back between Philadelphia and the Hurricanes on Thursday and Friday. You're going to see Jacob Dobish in one of those 2 games. I'm hoping that you see him against the St. Louis Blues and against Carolina. But that'd be asking a little bit too much, given the fact that, Montembeault is your number 1 goaltender. I do this because if there was another goalie in Montreal who was actually better, Montembeault would still be the second string. Jake Allen, for all that he did for this team, shit the bed as the years went on. And, he and Monty were 1A, 1B at one point. And you knew that it wasn't going to work out that way. So they get rid of Allen because, they were paying him a little bit more than they were Montembeault. And then all of a sudden, Monty's your number 1 goaltender, and you've got no backup. Caden Primo did not play very well this season. He did last year, which is the reason why the Canadiens got rid of Jake Allen. But then coming into this season, they expected more and got less. So now you bring in Jakob Dobish. Montembeault is still your number 1 goaltender, and you're making a playoff push with a guy who's never played more than 41 games in a season. Again, you can't expect miracles here. And this is where these 4 games are going to be critical. You need to get Dobish engaged. You need to get him in there to give Montembeault a little bit of time and space and a little bit of a breather. He needs a little bit of rest. Give him the St. Louis game. Give him the Hurricanes game. I mean, it all depends, right? And we know it's not going to happen. I know that against St. Louis, it's going to be Montembeault in goal. And, if he wins that game, chances are Dobish plays against the Flyers, and then Montembeault plays the next 2 against Colorado and the Florida Panthers. The Panthers is an obvious game they're going to want to play him to play in, but it is what it is, right? It's going to be a tough road trip. Against those teams, I mean, you never know what's going to happen. Philadelphia has Matvei Michkov. They've got a little bit of firepower there, not as much as they used to over the years. St. Louis, they were on hot and cold. They did not play very well tonight. Who knows what's going to happen there? The Hurricanes, they're a better hockey club than what happened to them tonight, and they always give the Canadiens fits. That's going to be a difficult out for the Canadiens. And, of course, playing against the defending Stanley Cup champions, never an easy hockey game. So the next 8 points are going to be critical in this playoff run. Are the Canadiens going to be able to do it? It remains to be seen. A lot of people are going to have to step up and work hard to make sure that they insulate their goaltenders and make sure they bring a better package to the table than they did in the last 3 games. You need to get engaged early. The Canadiens did not get a lot of shots on goal in each of the first 3 periods in these last 3 games. They need to be better. They need to be more engaged. They need to be ready out of the gate to battle against these hockey teams. If they're not, then they don't deserve to be in the playoffs. And here's the thing. Whether they get in or not, one way or the other, management is happy. Apparently, they're looking to see whether or not they can make a deal to get a second-line center in the offseason, and Kent Hughes has a couple of ideas. We haven't heard what they are yet. We've heard speculation about different players that might be picked up, but when have we been right lately when it comes to Kent Hughes? Not very often. So that's why I don't talk about rumors. That's why I don't try to pick things up, because I enjoy watching what he's going to do and the ideas that he has moving forward. So the next 4 games, folks, critical when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens. They need our support. They need us to be cheering. They need us to be happy. And what I need is for you to like this show and subscribe so you can get the latest notifications whenever I go on air. Go Habs, go. We'll see you on Tuesday night.